It's always exciting to have a guest back on the show. And actually, John and I recorded last week, but there was some kind of Microsoft bug that stopped our great conversation. And I said to John, it's so sad we didn't catch all of that. And he said, I can't remember everything I said, but I said it was really good. So I'm sure I'll try to do my best to extract that out of John again. So it's John from Levy that's back with us. And we talked, last time we talked was in 2021 in the early summer in May. And we're just coming out of the second lockdown. Or was the first lockdown? Second lockdown. And a lot have happened since then. So welcome back, John. It's super exciting to have you back on the show again.
Hi, Michael. Delighted to be back. And yeah, as I said, I've forgotten everything I said last week. So Microsoft issues or not, we can record clean again today and get hopefully some good conversation out of us both.
Can you give a bit of an update on, first of all, it would be great to hear what's happened since the pandemic, where Levy is now, but more, who is Levy? First of all, who are you? And what role do you play in the food service / food system?
Sure. So Levy is, I would describe the sports division of Compass. Compass are the world's largest contract caterer. Levy are the division or the sector, if you like, that just looks at stadiums, arenas, large-scale conference centers, and high-volume events, basically. I'm the CEO of that division in the UK and Ireland, and we're just reaching out with the brand into Europe as well. I've been with Levy for nearly 10 years now, so it's been a long time. Obviously, a lot of change post-COVID, during COVID, and how we've kept on our toes and adapted has been, I suppose, some of the big lessons that have come out of the years since we spoke last.
And can you maybe give us a bit of a journey of that? Like, what are the big things that happened? Because like everything in food has changed, and I'm more thinking about like what are the big milestones that like changed in your business model on how you deliver it? Because I can remember last time we talked, there was you definitely had some concerns, and I think most people have. How is this actually going to come back? And are people going to come back and congregate around events and watching football and all that good stuff we normally do? And we did. We are back, and we're doing all those great things again.
Yeah, there were so many unknowns in 2021. Looking back as to when would stadiums be full again? When would we see a packed house? The likes of Tottenham Stadium, and hopefully, we thought it would be quick, and actually it wasn't as bad as we feared. The challenges really came around trying to relife a business that had been put on hold. We'd repurposed the majority of our people to do things like testing centers, because obviously we operate venues up and down the country. So we had big car parks. So a lot of our staff during COVID were on the mobile testing centers in stadium car parks, for example. So we still had people around, but we hadn't operated those large scale events for a long period of time. Effectively, the whole business was mothballed for well over a year in its truest sense. And that conveyor belt of talent that hospitality relies on had been turned off. We'd already been impacted by Brexit. In the Southeast alone, we were seeing an awful lot of people prior to Brexit coming from Europe, not just Eastern Europe. We had lots of people coming to work, maybe just the summer season, but certainly, multiple events from the likes of Spain and Portugal and Italy and France. And that conveyor belt turned off post-Brexit for all the reasons we know. And then compounded by COVID, where your average 18-year-old comes to work with Levy and similar organizations, maybe 18, 19. They may have worked in their local pub or their local restaurant or their local cafe when they're in sixth form or in university. So by the time they turned up at Twickenham or at Wimbledon, they already had a good understanding of hospitality. And in 2022, there was nothing. That skill, there was a huge skill gap because they'd literally been sat at home in lockdown. So, we had to start from scratch with simple customer service techniques, the ability to look people in the eye, to communicate. That was a bit of a lost skill because social interaction had obviously been severely impacted and limited. And I think we're only seeing the early foothills of the impact of that on society, which I think will play out over the next decades, not years. That, kids that were in their formative years in high school and, colleges, I think it's done an awful lot of damage, and who knows what the end result will be. But the direct result in 2022 was, people just didn't know how to operate in a hospitality setting, didn't know how to clear tables, didn't know how to pour wine, didn't know how to take orders. So that was a really tough year because A, there wasn't enough people coming back, and B, the skill level wasn't there. And it got better in 23, and this year, 2024, it feels like, it's absolutely, we've got the numbers back, skill levels starting to mature again, hospitality is back on its feet, people are coming back out for live experiences, and it feels like, we're back in a good place.
Yeah, and I guess like lots of people are talking about they're dragging the pandemic after them, even though they don't want to talk about it. But when they look at their numbers and their commitments, especially when it comes to a restaurant side of business, there's still this drag of things, and there's still some people that struggle with talents. But you think that in your business, talent is starting to stabilize in a way, or just enough hands to do the job?
No, it's definitely stabilizing. We're seeing a good throughput of people now, but that's not just, I don't believe that's just down to luck, or that's because it's happening everywhere. No. I think we've worked hard to give people great career opportunities. We've opened a brilliant new apprenticeship center at Edgbaston Stadium called Accelerate, which is focused on, young apprentices and back of house. It's got some great like MasterChef style cook stations. We're engaging with local authorities and schools to get talent through there. We've got a great graduate scheme that, is now matured, I think, in the 4th or 5th year. We've got an amazing, high level chef scheme with Marcus Waring, called Forward. That's again in its third cohort just gone through. So that's starting to mature. We've done some good wraparound benefits in the intervening years. We pay the London living wage or the regional living wage equivalent. So pay, we're that's the bare minimum. We think we do well in comparison to some of our peers, but we also do simple things. And it's the simple things that I think have resonated the most. Like everybody gets a decent free meal now when they do a shift with us. They don't, and sometimes there's people working at some of our venues that may have only been doing a 5-hour shift, and it might have been at odd hours. So they were turning up maybe without having had dinner that evening, and then finishing at 10 p.m., really hungry, and then, spending maybe the last hour of their wages. Then they're going to Nando's or KFC and buying food, late in the evening that maybe isn't the best food to be eaten at that time of the evening, and spending their hard-earned money doing it, and actually giving them a free meal that's nutritious and part of their break while they're at work has been huge. It's had a huge impact, I think, and it shows that as a company we are trying to do more, that we do care about their our employees' health and nutrition, but also care about giving them a wraparound holistic experience when they work for Levy. And that's just one of the things. We try and do more around offering career pathways for people that maybe sometimes slip through our fingers in hospitality, that they might be at university and are just working with us, on a temporary job, and think, actually, I'm not interested in hospitality as a career. I'm going to go on and I'm going to work in financial services, or I'm going to be, a teacher or whatever. And actually, it's up to us, I think. And I always say to my teams, try and grab hold of those people while you can and show them that hospitality can be an amazing industry that can give you an enriching career, that can be well paid and have huge variety, and every day's different, and you get to experience things that you would never experience in an office, or doing the same 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And I think people that get involved in our industry fall in love with it for those reasons. And I think it's up to us to tell that story louder and better to more people that potentially don't necessarily see it as a career opportunity at the moment.
And it's super interesting. I just want to touch a bit on the food bit, because actually I've heard about serving, especially frontline employees, and we are talking about hospitality. Actually, feeding them well has become a priority to actually bring the culture to life as well. What an impact do you think this has on the culture that you're doing this? Like very, very simple thing, like sharing a meal or giving a meal, what kind of power do you think that has? Because there's no doubt about others I talked about. They say like suddenly we are perceived differently because of that meal. We're doing all the other things, benefits, compensation, training, and so on. But that meal was so powerful. And it's so interesting you're bringing that up.
Well, I think it goes back to one of the earliest things that defines us as humans, the ability to break bread in a social environment, what a mealtime was, that how hunter-gatherer communities actually interacted with each other, that it was a very social experience where things were shared and handed out to the different families that were part of the communal group. And I think there's something deep in our nature that always calls back or echoes through the generations that and sometimes is getting lost, in modern day family life with all the distractions and devices and media inputs, that very few families probably sit down and actually share a mealtime experience. And actually, if you're spending a lot of time at work, they almost become your second family. And if you're given an opportunity to take a break, to break bread, have a nutritious meal, to sit down and actually clear your mind for 10 minutes, 50 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, that can be very powerful and it can create new connections. And equally, we've also found, from a customer service point of view, shouldn't be particularly surprising. But if people are well fed and they aren't hangry, they actually serve customers with a smile more effectively. It's no big surprise, but sometimes it's the small things that can impact the overall customer experience. And happy, well fed, rounded, employees in terms of their experience with us and how they feel about the company and how they're being treated, does then reflect on how they will interact with customers in their day-to-day job. Especially if it's only a temporary job or they're doing a couple of shifts, or they're not necessarily embedded in the Levy vision or the long-term plan of what we're trying to do as a company. They might be just dipping in and out of a couple of shifts at an arena or a stadium. How they're checked in, their uniform that they've been provided, how they've been communicated prior to the event, the meal that they're given during the event, how quickly they get paid, how effectively and efficiently they get paid, and how accurate it is. That all then, comes back to, do I want to go back and do another shift with that company? And I think that's what we're a lot more focused on. Maybe we took for granted in the past.
Yeah, it's the quality of the foundations that you provide to people, the quality, almost the quality of the leadership you provide to that. That was quite interesting. In the other business post-kids I'm involved, actually, we've seen the last couple of months there's been like frontline jobs in hospitality restaurants that might not use our product, but actually using it to feed staff.
Yeah.
And exactly about giving that nutritious meal when people are at work. So of course they can eat off the menu, but actually always eating off the menu is not always interesting. And also what they need is actually power to take that 8-hour shift or 6-hour shift, or take that double shift is needed, and actually then providing that meal. And if you can sit down together, as one founder said to me, that's really key. And one of them, he owned a pizza restaurant chain. I can't mention name, but it was really interesting. He said, like, we make great pizza, but we can't live off eating pizza. We need to feed them something different. So again, yeah,
exactly,
it fits really well into what you're saying. And actually, if you can get people's senses around food involved, actually they get more involved in your business around food and explore that, and therefore they go out and make better customer service. But coming back to what I think is really interesting, what I've seen you done at Levy as well, is that you've done this strategic partnership with Curb, also bringing in another dimension to the business. Can you talk a bit about that? Because I found that really, really interesting. If you look in general on the industry, that normally we don't make strategic partnerships in hospitality. We do it ourselves. We don't partner up with people. That's a unique thing from my view when I look at what you do at Levy.
Look, I've worked for businesses in the past that have acquired businesses, changed the name, killed the brand, got rid of the founders, and then 3 years later wonder where's the business gone that I bought? It's like, well, yeah. When you're doing a partnership with a business, and Curb's a good example. Curb is a collective of amazing independent London street food traders. and they're led by, a really entrepreneurial leadership team. Simon Mitchell's the CEO, and he's got a great team around him. And, we can't recreate that, Levy. What we can do is give them access to amazing events and amazing stadiums and help grow the business. So we took a stake in the business, a minority stake. We let the management team still run independently, still have their ethos and their trader network, the entrepreneurship that still exists is alive and well, but we can just amplify that. And that's really what I think we're trying to do as a business across multiple areas. How can we use our strengths in our venue network, our power, our purchasing power, our ability to connect with millions of customers that come through our venues and sporting events and music events to really, turn the dial on sustainability, turn the dial on authentic street food, turn the dial on great, festival bars. We've taken a stake in peppermint bars that run things like the Hyde Park Summer Series and other music festivals. We've got a stake in a design and build company called Benchmark that can help wrap around hospitality experiences. We've gone into Ireland, partnering with a company over there that does similar sporting events and horse racing. So it's about enhancing our reach geographically, yes, but also in terms of the number of services we can provide, but keeping the authenticity and the genuine entrepreneurship that exists in those smaller companies alive and well, so everyone benefits.
Would you say it's like creating small giants within the big giant that actually can operate on their own, like self-organizing organisms?
Yeah, because that's how I kind of see Levy within Compass. We have our own management team. We're allowed to crack on with things, make our own business decisions. We have our own senior leadership team that operates relatively independently, but we have the security of Compass above us for, if we need capital investment, if we need to have some conversations about balance sheet, cash flow, and how we want to make some strategic investments and partnerships, they always come in and back us, because, they see the power of what we're trying to do in the sports and leisure field. And don't forget, our ultimate, the brand Levy started in the States, and they've seen how Levy has been so successful in the States, building out from a small deli in 1978 in Chicago to now being the world's biggest, sports caterer. It's quite an unbelievable story. And that happened because you've still got people in the business. Andy Lansing, who's still the president and CEO of Levy in the States. He was part of the original team. He was back there in the early 80s. And, that consistency and backing the people that are behind the brand has been very powerful.
And that's super interesting, because I think also what I've noticed and what you told me when we did our last conversation was also you've gone into Europe, into a stadium in Amsterdam, Ajax Amsterdam. Can you talk a bit about that and what the vision is for that, and what are you expecting in as you go into Europe? Because Europe is a different kettle of fish, I guess, than what you're used to.
Yeah, it is a different kettle. Very, very English expression, Michael. Different kettle of fish. It is different over there, but also the same in terms of customer experience and the expectations. Johan Cruyff Arena, which you're right, is home to Ajax, but also the Dutch national team play there, and it's kind of the place where you do outdoor concerts as well. We've just done a summer series with the likes of Taylor Swift and Pink and AC/DC playing there in the last month or so. So we went in there basically trying to do two things. One, using our experience and best practice and knowledge from the UK to help the arena on their journey. They wanted to change their public catering to be more, to bring in some new technology, to refresh the offer, to look at the design and build, to look at the types of products and the food products are being served, to look at how the tanks and the beer tech was working, and crucially also to be aligned with their sustainability journey, because they're one of the most sustainable stadiums and arenas in Europe. They've got an innovation center and have been, quite ahead of the market for a number of years. They went into solar technology. They've just installed the second large-scale battery. The first home game of this season will be fully run on renewable energy that they produce themselves, which is pretty amazing. They've really helped us and partnered with us on some of our push into different types of technology, yes, but also the actual products that we've brought over to Amsterdam. So Knockbar is another good example of the seaweed-coated disposables that won the Earthshot Prize that Prince William was championing a couple of years ago. Well, still champions, but they won the Earthshot Prize 2 years ago. We've gone into Amsterdam with that product as well. And it's just a bit of a wraparound service. But ultimately, you're still respecting the fact that the culture and the cuisine is different in the Netherlands to the UK as it is in the US. So we've got local chefs, local operators on the ground that understand that. We're not trying to give people, meat and potato pies in Amsterdam because they just look at it and go, what is this? We are reflecting back the local cuisine. They're into croquettes, for example, and things like frikandels, which are part of the Dutch culture and how it's served. And we're just doing our version of it or enhancing it in the way that we know we can, that we've taken, we've actually taken what was, fairly standard beef burger and we've actually enhanced it to make it a really good quality chicken burger, which obviously has a lower carbon footprint, but it's actually a nicer product in terms of the chicken we're using. It's a higher welfare Dutch chicken in that example. And that's been one of the most popular things on the menu, in the season so far. We're 6-7 months in already.
And I know you said to me as well that that's one of or not the most sustainable stadium in Europe, Johan Cruyff Arena.
Yeah, they're definitely up there for sure.
Yeah. And that comes back to what we talked about our last conversation. Actually, also what you lead with is sustainability, and we need to touch on that and dive into that. So what's happened on the sustainability agenda and vision and strategies since we talked last time? Because I know there's a lot going on in the behind the scenes of actually trying to build a different supply chain, trying to do the right thing, trying to lower the carbon emission, both in the front line, but all the way back to suppliers.
Yeah, it's a mammoth effort, to be honest, Michael. We've got the stated ambition to exit 2027 in a net zero position, which means that against the 2019 baseline, we have to decarbonize by a minimum of 72%, if not more, right the way through our scope 3 emissions. That means, our entire supply chain has to work with us, or we need to reimagine that supply chain to be able to achieve the ambition that we've got. And I'm confident we're on a great trajectory to do that. We've made some huge strides, and we started with the biggies, things like, meat protein, which is some of the biggest impact. If we can use slightly less higher quality from accredited sources and ideally from farmers that are, using some kind of regenerative practices. And, we've got a great relationship, for example, with the likes of Lake District farmers who are caring for the land and the soil and the peatland in a different way that actually is a lot more sustainable. Then great. Then we'll try and switch supplier. But we'll also try and switch some of the red meat into white meat, and we'll try and switch some of the white meat into fully veg or plant-based dishes. We'll try and not ban anything, but reduce the amount that we use. Try and recalibrate the plate that we're putting forward against the Eat Lancet report of 2019, I think it was now, that came out that showed that if we carry on eating in the way that we do with a huge high dependency on red meat and starchy potatoes and limited amounts of fresh fruit and veg, then we won't be able to hit our net zero ambitions as a planet. We won't be able to keep temperatures that 1.5 degrees against pre-industrial times. And we want to show that it is possible to rebalance the plate. It is possible to use our suppliers. When we catered for COP26 in Glasgow, that was a real watershed moment for us to show that we can do large-scale events using, a completely rebalanced supply chain that is local, yes, but also a lot more focused on plant forward, a lot more focused. You'll be pleased to know on pulses, on legumes, on things like perennial crops rather than annual crops, which have a much lesser impact in terms of the carbon in the soil and keeping the carbon in the soil. Working with suppliers that really are trying to push the boat out in terms of regenerative farming. There's some great examples out there like Wild Farmed who are showing the way in a cooperative manner across a number of farms now, or well over 100 farms, that there is hope and change coming, and that farmers can come on that journey where they don't need to put all those artificial inputs into the soil, fertilizers and pesticides and fungicides that cost a fortune, which puts the farmers on the breadline, and they can't really afford to, exist, and B are exhausting the soil, and there are only so many crops that are going to be left over as we go through the next decade or so. We need to really make sure that we're trying to enhance how we can really enrich the farmland of Britain in a regenerative way, which was essentially where we got to our partnership with Dr. Vincent, who I know you spoke to recently as well.
And there's a couple of things that came up here, and I wanted to ask you a question on is that, yes, amazing. I love you do pulses. I know you're a big fan of pulses. But what I really find interesting was because we worked a lot in the workplace. So it's about nudging people. It's not saying to them, you can't have meat, but there might be a different offer that you might find as tasty, and you will not miss the meat, because if you do the isms, as we talked about before, you're not really converting anything. How do you do that in a stadium context? Because, that's really predominantly really, I need comfort food, I'm out to having fun, and therefore suddenly, from a cultural point of view, the meat in Western Europe suddenly becomes the center in a hot dog or burger and so on. How are you doing that in the nudging perspective? How are you doing that from a behavioral change point of view? Is that possible, or do you just substitute products without people notice?
Well, there's a mixture of different strategies, really. You have to sell meat, so it comes back to what meat and what quality and what welfare and what footprint. So we did do a run of Billie Eilish gigs at the O2 that were fully vegan, and that was great because her and her family are well behind that, and her fan base obviously are mostly aligned with the vision of the star that they idolize. So that's great, and we can do that. But also, 99% of shows and venues you can't go fully vegan, and much as I'd like to, push that more, we have to reflect what customers actually want to buy on a wider scale. And if you get to the point, and we've tried different strategies, we've tried 50-50 burgers, 50% beef, 50% mushroom. We've tried swapping out beef burgers for chicken burgers, which has a much reduced carbon footprint, as long as the chicken you're using is real chicken and it's British chicken and it's from a higher welfare source. Not some of the frozen packaged products that might come in from the Far East or other countries. So it's not always as simple as saying swap X for Y. You've got to go under the next rung and say, okay, where's that come from? Where's that come from? And what's that animal being fed? I mean, that's another question that not enough people ask. That okay, most chickens in industrial capacity are fed essentially meal that's come from soybeans, and that soybean may have been grown in an area that's been deforested in the Amazon basin. So actually the impact of that, we might as well have stuck with a beef that's been grass fed in the Lake District. So it's a really complex mechanism that you have to dig really down into to get to the end result, but there are certain super ingredients that you can still have on the menu and still have a massive sustainability plus as well. I champion wild venison again and again and again because it's a great meat. It's actually the only meat that I eat. I'm a pescatarian apart from wild venison, if that doesn't make me sound too weird. And the reason is because it's the most sustainable thing we can do is to eat wild venison. They're an ecological pest on the Highlands of Scotland and other areas in the UK. There's over 2 million venison in the UK. We can sustain a population of about 400,000. They have no natural predators. There's no wolves left to eat them. There's no wildcats left to eat them. So and they breed in an uncontrolled environment unless they're culled, and not enough estates are managing the culls effectively or appropriately and getting that meat back into the food system. It ends up getting wasted or inappropriately sourced. And if we can find a route to market, and I was at a Highland estate last Thursday where that was like, okay, this is nirvana for me, because it's going to help this estate if we can take the wild venison off it, because they basically go around and graze everything. They'll eat the saplings, they'll eat any green shoots that are coming through. You end up with a really barren landscape if you've got too many wild deer traversing it. So the more deer we can take off the land, the more of a carbon sink it'll become, and more biodiversity will come back to the highlands on the back of it. You are protecting the environment by essentially putting a wild venison burger on the menu. And we have got, and we've got some great street food operators that already do that. If anyone was at the Oval Cricket Ground this year, there was a great wild venison burger for sale. And we think, well, actually, there's a huge market if we can just take 10, 15% of the beef out of our existing menus and replace it with wild venison. For me, that's a far better story than maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I was thinking, well, let's put a load of plant-based alternatives, but they weren't real food either. They were ultra-high processed meat alternatives. And actually, I've come a bit, 180 on that and gone, well, I'm not so sure that's the solution anymore. I think if we are providing plant-forward meals, they've got to have real pulses, real veg, real substance that's come from real food, not necessarily a bunch of chemicals that's been cooked up in a lab that we don't actually know what's happening to our body long term if we're putting that inside us. And I, like many others, read Chris Van Tulpen's book recently, Ultra Processed People, and that's had a quite a big effect on me as well. And saying, well, maybe we've made some not the great choices in the last couple of years and how we've been thinking about this. And having great quality sustainable meat, great quality sustainable dairy, great quality sustainable fish, but just in lower proportions on our menus. But then dialing up the real pulses, the real veg, the real plant forward approach, lots more freshness and British supply chain in that, and creating wholesome, really great food that helps gut health, that helps the biome, that helps us to keep ourselves in a better condition. Well, that's surely the best solution ever. It's good for the planet and it's good for ourselves. It's healthy for everyone, and actually that's going to be our next big challenge as to how we make sure we're not letting slip into our supply chain too much ultra processed food, because it's in stuff. As soon as you start getting hooked on reading the ingredients of the stuff, you become obsessed with it. And I'm like, I'm trying to ban everything now. When you start reading into it, my kids don't like me very much at the moment for what I'm taking off them. But I think it's the next big question we have to address, because most of this stuff is really bad for the environment as well, and has been created in a way that isn't particularly sustainable.
And I love you on that journey, because it's so important that we ask the question about, what is the food we're actually serving, what is actually coming from. And Chris Van Tulpen actually was number 5 of Amazon, most bought books. So people are getting aware there's something happening, and you will start getting that question. It's not about allergen. Suddenly they will start asking, is any of this ultra processed? And then the fake meat has its role to play, but actually, is it the right thing? And there's some great alternatives. There's mushroom things and so on coming to the market. But I think people are really looking for the natural thing. I really love the way you talk about meat as a source of flavor and satisfaction, not the main thing. And I think really that's how we also can move the bell curve, actually, but less but better quality meat on the plate. So it's more about flavor enhancing than the main thing, or 50-50 products, as you called them. And that's exactly how I see it as well. Like, we really need to move that way as an industry, really to move the dial of the emission in a way over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think there's two camps, isn't there? There's the camps which I guess I most naturally fit into, which is I really care about the future of our planet and have a desperate, almost urgent need to try and do something about it. But I've also you got to be realistic that not everyone's in that space. But there's a lot of people in the space of their own personal health or their family's health,
Yeah.
that they really care about, as obviously I do as well. And they obviously there's a Venn diagram where for most people they do intersect and actually drive forward most decisions. And if we can put forward sustainable solutions that are actually more healthy for you and your family, that are reducing the amount of microplastics that's in fresh water, that's getting into all of our diets, that are in pretty much every fish that you might buy, is in, the fact that, most fresh fruit, most fresh veg, if you don't watch it, has at some point touched a pesticide or a fungicide. And if you did a test on your hair, your hair would record that. And I think people would be very shocked of what's already in their bodies, that they've ingested through a variety of what seemingly looks like healthy food, but actually is, slowly poisoning us in a different way. If we can put forward a different approach to that, then I think you can hit on something that's fairly unique. That, as going back to the healthy for us, healthy for the planet, the right product at the right time, you should get everyone on board. Because I do worry post COVID that this idea of sustainability has become politicized, has become this kind of right versus left argument, as if the future of the planet and the future of our children and our grandchildren should be something that's a choice of whether you're right wing or left wing. I just find that incomprehensible. We've only got one planet, we all live on it. So it's not a political issue, guys. If we don't do something to control this, we're all going to be in a really, really bad situation in a relatively short period of time. Again, everyone's has this idea that it's decades and decades off. We've seen the impacts already in the last couple of years about, in the UK, it's more about we're just getting wetter and milder, not necessarily the extremes of temperature, but we are getting flooded. I was at a potato farm in April that was so wet they hadn't even got any plants in the ground at that point, and they were worried about their crops full scale. We had a horse racing meet last week, middle of July, cancel because it was waterlogged. The climate change impacts are going to impact sporting events, hospitality experiences on a level that we have to plan for. So it's in all of our interests, regardless of politics, to get on top of this issue and find a solution. Our customers can still have great experiences, can still come out and enjoy the game or enjoy the live music, but know that partner behind the scenes is doing their very best to provide that in the most sustainable way. And all of our venue partners are trying to think about that in their own span of control. Artists are asking that when they're touring now. People like bands like Coldplay are very open, as people like Billie Eilish, about how do we tour in a more sustainable way? How can we be more conscious about our impact? And we've got our part to play, as have a number of other contractors and partners at these venues. And if we can all come together to create what can be a solution. In 1975, played at the O2. We actually did that in a carbon neutral way. We worked with Curate to take out of the environment any carbon that we'd used to deliver those events. And I think that was pretty much a first in the UK, if not in Europe, to show that sustainable events can be done at scale.
It was really interesting. You touched a little bit of Dr. Vincent. I just wanted to dive a little bit into that because, again, it's a bit like Curve. I think it's like a really different approach of trying to integrate backwards into the farm, because you already mentioned the farmers a couple of times. And when it comes to farming, I don't know how aware people are in the day-to-day life in the industry. Actually, farmers are in a very distressed situation. And I met a farmer at the Chef Manifesto conference, I think it was about a month ago. And I was a bit shocked that he was standing with 800 pounds after everything. So in the end of the month, he had 800 pounds to his family. And he said, I'm running a good farm, a healthy farm, but I struggle. Can you, with that platform, and then talk a bit about the work you do with Dr. Vincent? Because in principle, it is trying to, as I understand Dr. Vincent, is to reimagine how farming could look.
Yeah. So before we get into Dr. Vincent and the project, you got to look back at how has farming got into this situation. And how have we as consumers enabled it through our demands that, we think it's normal these days that we should still be buying 2 chickens for £5 or £6 in a supermarket, that it's that the price of bread shouldn't really fluctuate for a decade and the price of milk should be under a certain amount without, I think, really understanding the real costs that sit behind that. And unfortunately, government policy has had its part to play over the years, not just in the UK and North America, across Europe. We've put enormous subsidies behind fossil fuels about using pesticides, growing certain crops, encouraging stockpiling. Hasn't been great or beneficial. Farmers haven't been incentivized until very recently to think about the health of their soil, about regeneration. We've pulled out, I don't know how many miles of hedgerow across the country. We've gone to a fairly monoculture in terms of what we do now. We're essentially, one half of the country is grazing and grazing only really a couple of different, essentially cows and sheep. And then we're getting more concentrated in our approach to how we farm chickens and pork. And unfortunately, we are going down a bit of the US route of this heavy industrialized approach, which has huge impacts in terms of pollution. The big chicken farms that are getting built down the Wye Valley now. We can't, the nature can't sustain that. The outputs are then coming out into the river, the pollutants, the nitrates, the effluent is killing species and killing biodiversity right down that river. And that's only one example. And it's exactly the same with these huge mass dairy farms and pig farms. And so, but we through policy and our need to keep prices in supermarkets as low as possible, and I'd say an unhealthy competition environment, we've ended up not treating our food system with as much care as we should. And we've got to, from the top now, try and reinvest and reinvigorate how we want farmers to treat their land. And and hopefully coming out of the Common Agricultural Scheme, there are, some green shoots that the government, prior to the recent change, was already thinking that way. I hope that Labour will accelerate that. Now they've come to power. Hopefully they'll dust off Henry Dimbleby's, food plan and really enact some of the changes, because I think there were some great recommendations in there around agriculture and our food system, and great recommendations around health and diet and nutrition and fighting obesity as well. I think there was some progress on the former with the previous government and not a lot on the latter. So if we can bring all of those together and really be a bit more collaborative of how we support farmers, what we're trying to do as a company is cut out some of the middlemen, if you like, or middle women in the system, and try and go direct to producers, direct to farmers, and guarantee them volume, guarantee them multi-year deals, so they know exactly that they're going to get paid a fair price, whether that's for the carcass or the crop, that we will be a true partner and help them grow their business in a really high volume way. But we also wanted to show through our project with Dr. Vincent, which is essentially a farm near Harrogate, by a reservoir that Yorkshire Water own the land. They've given it on a peppercorn rent. So Vincent can really show and demonstrate what regenerative farming looks like in a small scale environment, but they can be replicated and used as a flagship to get, Yorkshire Water are pulsing through their young farmer scheme, for example, in the area. And we're taking up our employees and our clients and our chefs, importantly, to show them, okay, this is what farming looks like if you try and put the soil health first. How do you keep the water on the land through different water irrigation systems? How do you, plant orchards, but also plant cover crops and perennial veg and actually encourage microfungi to exist in the ecosystem below ground, which is, as Dr. Vincent's taught me over a number of years now, the most important combination of how we can get there. We're restoring hedgerows. We're bringing back, native woodland species. We've had grants from, organizations to rewild certain areas of the farm and to create new woodlands as well. So the biodiversity of the space and the farm can really, come back to life. It was originally a sheep farm. We're not banning sheep. Again, sheep will be reintroduced in a silver pasture system that they can actually be, in a small way, in a small scale, sheep and cattle can be great for an ecosystem. Their dung and manure can be used in a very positive way. How they scratch and turn the soil can improve, the grassland areas. It's just the higher volume and number of head of cattle. You quickly go into a damaging scale if you don't control it in the right way. And what we're trying to do with the farm is demonstrate on a small scale, on a flagship project, that it can be done, and then build out from that.
And I love that again. It feels like, for me, definitely, you're taking a huge responsibility for the wider food system. A big food service operator like you are. What is the, you're on this incredible journey about like getting out of the pandemic, getting the business model working again, making sure the business makes a positive impact on sustainability, on social impact as well. How hard is this? Because it sounds like you're doing a lot. So how hard is it actually to get this right? I guess there's an immense amount of work from you and your team going in to do this. And what drives the team, you think, to do that?
Well, I think it's only hard if you're doing something you don't love and you're doing it without purpose. So I think my team would all say, yeah, their jobs are certainly not easy and they work hard and it can be stressful at times. But hopefully we'd all sit back and go, but we're trying to do things the right way. And we are trying to have an impact larger than just turning a profit at the end of the year that was bigger than the profit last year, that we grew for the sake of just growing. That for me isn't interesting, doesn't excite me. I look at the profit number as an output that measures how successful we've been in delivering our ambition around the planet, around our people, around our partnerships with our clients. That the money should look after itself and then ultimately get, invested back into our people and our projects that we really care about. I would say it's not hard what we do. I'd say it's challenging, but it's what motivates us. It gets us out of bed. If we were just doing it by numbers and it was cookie cutter, I think I'd have given up a long time ago. I don't really like no as an answer. So I always think, if someone says it can't be done, let's find a way of doing it. And sometimes you just have to set a target. We set the 2027 net zero target. I'll be honest, Michael, we had no real idea how we were going to do it, whether it was even achievable. There's some people who still who would say it's not achievable, but I guarantee we'll do it, because where there's a will, there's a way. I get, you go back, and I recently went to there's a great exhibition on near King's Cross about the moon landings at the moment that Tom Hanks narrates. And there's the great speech that JFK made in 62, I think it was, where he said, look, we're going to land a man on the moon in 69, before the decade is out. He didn't say 69, he said before the decade is out. And he didn't know how. He didn't know, exactly the plan of how we were going to get there, but he gave the direction that's where we were going. And I think that's very much how I feel about my role in the organization is, you've got to set a really clear target that this is where we're going to, this is our landing point, but then give people a lot of independence that they can, as long as they all agree that that's the destination, the journey they take on how they get there, they have a degree of independence with them and their teams as to how they achieve that. And as long as they're on bus, and I have a threat, I can't say it because I'll swear, but you either get on the bus or you get off. You got to be with us. And if you're with us and you're engaged and you like the destination, you can have some great fun in finding that and picking your way through the journey to get there. And I think that's important. And I think having a purposeful company that really does believe in bigger things than just money and growth for the sake of growth attracts people that are like-minded and attracts people that want to work for bigger things than simply, where's my next paycheck coming from? And certainly we're seeing that with the younger generations coming through as they graduate universities and are coming through graduate jobs and are coming to us from other companies. They want to work with like-minded individuals. And I think that's what makes me most proud now. Levy has a different culture right the way through. It's not about me. It's about when you go to a venue and you spoke, if you spoke to one of my chefs or one of the managers of the venue, I think they would say a similar version of what I've said on this podcast now. In their own way, in their own words, with their own, in their own purpose. But I think it's permeated the culture now. And I think that's the only way you really achieve change, if you've got everyone thinking about it in a similar way and putting their own spin on it.
Yeah, well, I'm not barking up the tree. I've experienced that, so you're absolutely right. There is, you definitely have ambassadors out in the front line that is trying to fight the same battle as you as the CEO is doing. What has been, John? You're a CEO of a organization that's doing things differently. You're changing, you're setting new industry standards. What has been your top learning over the last couple of years? Because there's so much changing. There's so much speed right now in business, especially food we're involved in.
Yeah.
What has been your learning and you would like to share with people?
Well, I think we always think that things are going to settle down, right? We always go, there was the disruption of Brexit and COVID, and then we've had the disruption, unfortunately, of the conflict in Ukraine, for example, that put the spike into inflation and food prices and disrupted supply chains. And, I think we're always looking for this period where things will settle back down to normal. And I think what I've learned is there isn't probably going to be a normal period, that we're going to be in a constant flux, a constant change. The companies that adapt are the ones that are going to survive, that to be nimble, to react, to be brave, not to sit on the fence, not to overthink things. Listen to, obviously, counsel around your senior team as to what the right decision is, but ultimately move forward with purpose. And procrastination is not your friend in the current environment. You've got to commit to things, and you've got to be. And if you get things wrong, own up to it. I don't know anybody that's got 100% success record. We've had plenty of failures, and we still do. And we're not perfect in any way. People could listen to this and think that we're some kind of perfect company and go into one of my venues and find 10 different things wrong in the first 10 minutes. And that's fine, because you'll never be perfect and you'll never ultimately succeed in every area. But owning up to that and being reflective and finding the best solutions that fit the right environment at the right time, I think is one of the key learnings that we've taken, to move with speed, to surround yourself. I know it sounds obvious, but we have recruited maybe a level above than we would have done in pre-pandemic, that actually getting some amazing people in that can get us to our next stage of growth, to actually recruit that person that you might not need for another 2 years, but to have them in the business now, and to make sure that and I say to everyone that works with me, every single one of you must have someone below you that will be your successor, that right now that is at least as good as you. And if you haven't got that person, you failed at your job. Because a lot of people can be very defensive and go, no, I don't, if I wasn't here, everything would fall apart. Well, that's the sign of the worst boss, the worst manager. If anyone ever says that, sack them immediately, because you've got to have the confidence that if you're great at your job, you allow good people to flourish underneath you and to be your successor, and have that succession plan right the way through your organization, and back the organization to grow in a purposeful manner, that it will be big enough to house all those people as it goes, and that the opportunities will be brilliant for everyone. Because otherwise you're saying, well, we're just going to stay static and I'm not going to let go of my job, so there's no room for opportunity here.
Yeah, I don't know, John, if you really, you lean yourself off against this book, but there's a book by a guy called Jim Collins that's called Good to Great. And I have it up here by the thing. And he really talks about level 5 up here. If you're looking at the video I was recording here, there's 2.0 and then there's Good to Great. And that's the reason why the podcast exists. And it's really starts with level 5 leadership. And it's really interesting you say level 5 leadership is actually there where you are creating leaders for the future of your organization. And you also talked about right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. And it's like really where there's like some of the most successful companies that has not only performed financially, but also has an impact. And when he wrote this book, it was not about the planet and sustainability, but actually social impact in their local communities. And these companies exactly, do these things. It's one of their key traits and acts they do and principles, you can call it what you want. So I just thought it was really interesting. I don't know if that's a place where you're inspired from, but it sounds like a book where lots of what you're saying reflects with. What is the one question, John, you wished I asked you? And what would that question be? And what would the answer be?
I guess the thing that's starting to play more, one of the areas I guess that we've already mentioned is around ultra-processed foods and the impact and the change that might bring as people start to view the foods that we've eaten en masse in the last 30, 40, 50 years that have been created from scratch, that we as humans haven't eaten for 2 million years up to that point. And then we've been feeding ourselves these food-like substances. And what's the impact going to be on our health and the wider implications as we go forward? And is there going to be a sea change against that? Is there going to be a bit of a consumer uprising against these products with a bit more knowledge and a bit more understanding that maybe legislation and labels should be applied to them? And I guess the other big question I've got in my own head at the moment is artificial intelligence and how that would apply to the hospitality industry. And you've got two schools of thoughts on this at the moment. One, it's just the next .com bubble that will burn bright and then flare away. And actually the valuations that we're seeing of some of these huge companies in America, is it real? Is it going to have an impact? And I'm not in that camp. I'm in the camp that I actually think there is going to be something pretty revolutionary on the back of AI. How we harness it in our industry, how we use it as a predictive tool in our supply chain. You can think how complex my challenges are in supply chain, not just with the net zero ambition, but just with the complexity of the number of recipes and menus that can be bespoke by venue, the number of suppliers. If we were churning AI in a more purposeful way in our supply chain, in our mechanisms around rotoring, in our mechanisms of how we forecast sales and against our staffing, supply and demand. And if this became more intuitive and actually, offered suggestions around decisions that could be made before and during an event, rather than relying on the manager or deputy manager to have all that information, stored in their memory that happened 6 months ago at a similar event and therefore I should know that to tweet that. We're not that good. There's no way that the human mind can compute at the speed of some of these complex algorithms. And I think that's around financial data and supply chain and staffing. I think AI is going to be fascinating how that evolves over the coming years. Also, obviously terrifying because, they could get out of control and kill us all. So, let's be wary of that. That's a little bit out of my remit. It's a bit out of my remit. Anyone that would watch Terminator, especially Terminator 2, I thought, it's all there. You just need to maybe pay a bit more attention. And then the final bit I think is interesting, and again, it's a trend that I think the FMCG companies are starting to panic about, are the appetite suppressant drugs that are coming out. They're widespread in America. They're starting to be, get a wider traction in the UK and Europe, which are having some dramatic impacts on obesity. These were diabetes drugs that, now getting prescribed for people that are obese or I think in certain terms just overweight, and they're having, essentially suppressing your impulse to overeat and having fairly dramatic impacts in terms of weight loss and sustained weight loss as long as you stay on the drugs. There's a couple of big questions on the back of that is, hopefully that won't impact businesses like us who are providing in the main good, nutritious meals that aren't that, it's not there as a snacking solution, is there provide a decent quality nutritious meal that people will still need. And it's just taking maybe some of the snacking elements out of people's diets that, I don't think anyone can argue with that. But also there's that interesting question of, well, what are the longer term impacts of these drugs that are affecting our diet, our impulses, our hormones? Is that a great thing? I guess it is if you're in a position where your health's really badly affected by your weight. But there is this danger that they become so widespread use. It's so easy to use.
Yeah.
There's potentially a pill format coming out that everyone gets hooked on, and then do we lose the love of food, Michael? That's my genuine fear.
Yeah.
If the whole population suddenly
meal food
gets people used to say, "Oh, space food would be so cool." I'm like, no, that's the opposite of what's cool. You want real food, and I always, I said last night, go back to Michael Pollan. Eat food, i.e. real food. Not too much, mostly plants, and get real enjoyment out of that. That's how I'd like to, everyone to live their lives if possible. And if we go down a pill popping culture of keeping our weight in check through pharmaceuticals, I'm not sure that's potentially a great future for us as hospitality professionals.
Yeah, we have. It's such a beautiful, because we could jump into the AI conversation. I just want to end the conversation. It was such a beautiful place to end. For Michael Pollan is right. Eat more right food and better food. That's actually the solution to many of the challenges we have. And I agree with you. I haven't found anyone myself that says it's more simply as complex the problem to solve is around that. Where can people connect with you, John, if they want to hear more about what you do or want to know more about Levy's work on different things? Where's the best places to go?
Well, we have a great website, levy.co.uk. We also have our own, if people want to work with us, we have our own internal agency called Constellation, also has its own website, constellation.co.uk. If they want to connect with me individually, the only social media I really use is LinkedIn, so quite easy to find on that. Regular user of LinkedIn. But other than that, we Levy Restaurants does, or Levy has its own account on Instagram, and I think we're on. I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know. I think we're on TikTok. I'm pretty sure we're definitely on Instagram, and some great food photography and videos definitely get posted there.
Great. We'll put all the links in the show notes for people to find after this conversation. Thank you so much, John, for coming back again and staying with us, even though we had technical issue on the first go. I'll send you and the team power and energy for the journey ahead to make more positive impact on our beautiful world.
Yeah. And thank you, Michael, for everything you do as well.